Today I'm with Simon Kemp, who is a marketing strategist in Europe and over in Asia as well. He finds himself mostly in London, but occasionally in Singapore. And he's the founder or the marketing strategist, founder of Kepios, and as well heavily involved with We Are Social, one of the biggest social media marketing agencies in the world. And in this conversation, we talk a lot about social thinking and how to inspire conversation and, what is important through listening through social. We get oftentimes caught up in terms of broadcasting our message, and really what the intent of social is to actually listen and then respond to your communications and your community and that sort of thing. So it's really about understanding that context and the motivators that really sort of connect with what your audience is doing and what they're expecting. And Simon, he's got some years and years of experience that he gets into, and just a fantastic story and insight in terms of how to make social better for your business. Doesn't matter what size you are. We all need to do a few things here and there to make things better and more efficient. And Simon definitely nails it with coming up with some great ideas that can actually work in business. So take a listen on this edition of Breaking Digital Podcast.
Overwhelmed with online or just wanting to learn more about how you can build a successful business amidst all of the self-appointed gurus, big buzzwords and empty promises? The Breaking Digital Podcast by Doyle Bueller tells you exactly what smart entrepreneurs need to know to escape the clutter, get clear of the confusion, and pass the bullshit of building and growing a successful business online. It's about digital leadership and delivering the best value for your business online to your audience. Now, here's your host and author of the book on digital leadership and online marketing, The Digital Delusion, Doyle Bueller.
So I'm with Simon Kemp today from We Are Social, one of the largest social media agencies in the world. And welcome to the show, Simon.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I am Simon, as you correctly introduced. I'm originally Scottish, but I moved to Singapore about 10 years ago, and I've been doing a variety of different sort of marketing things in the time that I've been there. About 5 years ago, I set up the Singapore office for We Are Social. And since then, I've been really lucky traveling around the region, sharing all sorts of enthusiasm for all things social with a variety of great brands. So some of the world leaders like Diageo and Unilever, right the way down to small businesses and even individual entrepreneurs.
Oh, fantastic. So it sounds like it's been quite the adventure for you. What have been some of the highlights? Clients, locations, projects?
Yeah, so I think in particular, when we won our first really big client, which was Lenovo, that was a real joy. It was a sort of demonstration that the work that we are doing was sort of something that big brands wanted to be a part of as well. And we were really lucky to go on a journey with them. So they had just set up their internal team to run social media for the whole world out of Singapore. And we then had the joy of sort of helping them to shape that and to provide inputs into everything. And we had a really good sort of collaborative relationship with the client on that one as well. So that, I think, in terms of the work, was a real highlight. We've been lucky enough to sort of do something similar with Intel as well. So we've sort of grown from doing a very small project on Pinterest with them, and that's now grown into a multi-million sort of dollar relationship where we're helping them right the way around Asia Pacific to develop content and to manage conversations with a lot of their different audiences across a whole variety of different social media. So, yeah, I mean, those two clients, obviously really, really proud to have been able to work with them. We've also been involved in producing a variety of thought leadership, which we regularly hear back from people, helps them in their day-to-day life, which is something that we feel very proud of. Every year we produce a digital report on the social media usage of pretty much every country around the world, together with internet usage and mobile phone usage. That gets read by a few million people every year. And it's really nice to be able to provide those kinds of things for free, knowing that everybody can now have a point of reference that helps them make the basic decisions that they need to be able to move on to the much higher value stuff, which is obviously the thing that everybody wants to get involved in. How do we change people's lives and make a real difference to our businesses?
Yeah, well, I was actually just going to ask you that, Simon. How do you define, you're obviously focusing on social media. How do you define social media? Like what is there, is there a definition, or is there sort of a framework that you have to work within?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and one that we've been battling with for a number of years as we are social. So I think, in particular, the way that we see ourselves as a company has evolved. Obviously, in the beginning, social media was kind of the area of expertise that we developed, and it's still something that we believe passionately in. But increasingly, we've realized that to actually build a brand through social, an awful lot of the stuff you need to do starts outside of social. So we've developed a framework that we call social thinking, which is an understanding of the psychological and sociological motivations that inspire conversations. It still remains a very important part of everything that we do, but I think it's that idea that a brand that succeeds in social media isn't necessarily the brand that creates the best content for social media. It's the one that understands the conversations that people have organically and how you use your full marketing mix to inspire that kind of conversation. So those are the bits that kind of really get me excited, and that's where we would start most of our best planning. Obviously, you still get the people that come in and say, we'd like to do an activity on Facebook, can you help? And we're always delighted to do that. But it's when a brand comes in and says, we want to stimulate conversation around the following topics, how do we do that? And we get involved in a variety of different things. So it might be something as simple as packaging. So what can we do with, if you imagine even somebody like Starbucks, where they write your name on the side of the cup, and what could you do to encourage people to take a picture of that so that they then organically share it with their networks in a positive kind of way to start conversations amongst themselves about what's good about Starbucks and what they love about it. So it's exactly that kind of thing that we are getting most excited about. Obviously that goes a lot further than just creating great videos or static posts for things like Facebook.
Yeah, kind of have to have that background to support that and that strategy. It sounds like some of those large companies, mid-size, they kind of get it. They kind of understand that, hey, this is I know I need a conversation. I need to know I need to have a community.
Yeah,
let's get started.
I think, which is the important bit, is that there's still a large number of marketers out there, regardless of how big their business is, that think that social success is all about talking about themselves. And I think that's the bit of advice that we give to all of our clients is, if you want to be in social, then you've got to behave sociably. And everybody, when you're a teenager, you always get the advice of how to be a more socially acceptable kind of person. And ironically, the tips that we give to clients from their business perspective are exactly the same as you would get just on a social basis. How do you become a more interesting and engaging person?
It depends a lot on the company too, in terms of how they understand social and how they misunderstand it. Can you maybe talk about how you feel some other companies sort of misunderstand it? And like you mentioned, they just want to use it as a broadcast medium?
Yeah, so I'm not going to name names. That would be antisocial of me to do that.
Okay.
There are still a large number of big brands out there that believe that success in social media is about achieving the greatest possible reach. Now, obviously, reach is important. If you've got something you want to share with the world, you want to share it with as many people as possible. But unfortunately, too many companies think that buying huge numbers of adverts in social channels to push out very boring, self-centric and boring messages. I'll just keep repeating boring because it's a nightmare. I think it's that great danger that people want to talk about themselves and their brands rather than understanding what the audiences that they want to engage are interested in, and then have a conversation with them around that helps those audiences to understand how the brand can be of value. So it's a classic sort of model where the psychology is understanding the needs of the audience and the consumer, rather than sort of spending all your time polishing this perfect message that in all reality is actually just far too egocentric. I think things like social listening sadly get totally overlooked. People still use it as a rearview mirror to tell them how well their campaign did and how many mentions a hashtag that they stuck on the end of their advert got, rather than using it for its real value, which is to understand the things that people care about. So if you sort of take that Steve Jobs quote of people don't know what they want until you give it to them, the irony is that most marketers don't know what those people want either. But with something like social listening, if we spend the time to analyze their conversations, not just about brands or the category, but their lives in general, we can start to get a better idea of what they might want. And we can actually have conversations with them to help refine that before we go investing any money in building something new that might actually be a gamble if we didn't have that information. So I think that it's that idea. Too many brands treat social media as this sort of opportunity for them to shout about themselves and what they've already got, rather than building a relationship with people and actually adding mutual value at every opportunity.
So do you think that sort of fundamentally changed from sort of, let's go back 40 years, the heyday of Mad Men advertising and that sort of thing? Has that changed at all, or do you see an evolution then in marketing and through the use of social media?
But I think that the evolution, it started a lot earlier than that. So if you go back to sort of the mass media world back in the days when you would live in your small town and you would go to your local grocer, and your local grocer would know your name and know the name of your family and know that your husband ate this kind of food and your wife liked that kind of drink and whatever else, and they would recommend things based on you as an individual because they had a relationship with you. And those were the people that we trusted, so we would go and ask questions to them, we would ask questions to our friends and family, and that was kind of the way that we learned about brands and the world. And then mass media came along, and the Mad Men, as you rightly pointed out, and it sort of changed things because TV was suddenly this shiny new world that brought us a whole different world of perspectives, and we started to trust what we saw on TV in a totally different way. And obviously that evolved over time to the situation where we were maybe 10, 15 years ago, where that sort of was the dominant model, where you would trust it way more than you would trust anybody in a store, and you would form your own opinions based on advertising. And the irony is that we never really lost that desire to connect with other people and to form opinions together. And I think that social media has made that now much easier. Obviously, it's something that we can do at scale now, which we couldn't really do digitally before the advent of social media. So I think that it's ironically a reversion to the days pre-TV, pre-radio perhaps. And if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, great sort of psychological study into why people do the things that they do, I think it is very clear why those conversations with other people about things we care about have greater value, because it's not just finding solutions to problems. There's also that sort of desire to have a sense of belonging and to form bonds with other people. So conversations about brands and social media satisfy a multitude of different human needs, and not just, I need to find a better detergent, what would you recommend? Which, it's a real need, but it's not the only one in life.
Yeah, we need a social network on finding the proper soap to use.
Yeah, just in case anybody thinks you're being serious, I'm going to say absolutely, please do not ever
Okay. Actually, that's a great idea.
Ironically, you laugh, but we've had requests like that from clients, people coming in and saying, we'd like to build a social network around detergents, around shampoo. And it's like, guys, you're off your heads. This is just not sensible. This is not what people do. Building networks around fashion is fine, and finding your role within that, but nobody's interested in sort of the specifics of what you make enough that they're going to pay attention to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because they're not really looking for the soap. What are they looking for? They're looking for clean clothes, right?
Yeah, but I think, you stretch that out to the other end of the example. If you speak to the average millennial girl, she's not in the least bit interested in detergent, but she probably spends half of her waking life browsing through Instagram, and, she may even define herself by the fashion tips that she imparts, and then the influencers that she follows and stuff like that. And taking care even of those clothes and the outfits and whatever else is an important thing for her, but it's not about the detergent. It's always about the clothes. So even in that kind of model of conversation, you can see that a brand that understands the driving motivations, which are very clear if you look at the conversations people like that have in social media, you can easily find a role for yourself. I mean, even as something as mundane as shampoo, if you take it out of the world of cleaning your hair and make it about hair, which is, very important for men and women, it's the sort of thing that people do end up having conversations about, but it's rarely at Tuesday 9:00 when you're on Facebook at work. It's probably going to be Saturday afternoon 4 p.m. when you're planning what you're going to do that evening, chatting to your friends where you're going to go, and at that point a conversation around hairstyling may be very appropriate. Yeah. So an awful lot of the benefits, I suppose, of social media are they allow you a conversational context which you were never going to have in a mass media world when you were just buying coincidences. It's like we might happen to have the full audience at 8 p.m. on a Wednesday because they're watching whatever the show of the day was, Desperate Housewives. Whereas now, obviously, people watch these things randomly. So Game of Thrones, I'll sort of stream it whenever I'm ready for it, and the Netflix sort of binge watching phenomenon. So that whole coincidence media buying thing is completely lost its way. And as a result, we've got an opportunity to redefine the model of when we reach people and how we talk about stuff. Yeah. So I think, there's a definite need to shift our media buying and planning mindset, around all that kind of stuff.
And so where do you see things going then? So we've kind of gone through, earlier individual communication, like you were talking about, where the person who's selling you the stuff knows who you are and what you do and that sort of thing, to sort of that mass media broadcast. Social media seems to be bringing it back. Where do you think we're going to be in about 5-10 years?
I love this. Giving me your predictions for the evolution of the world. So I think in the near term, it's fairly obvious that things like chatbots are becoming a part of the plans for Facebook. If Facebook are investing in it, there's a very good chance that brands will get behind that as well. And I know that Facebook aren't the only one. So I think that in the near term, we're going to see an explosion of that. I think I've got some skepticism around that. I have a fear that marketers will do what they traditionally do, which is to use it to serve their own purposes rather than to find mutually rewarding opportunities. But I think once we get beyond that, once we move past the initial wonders of basic artificial intelligence for chatbots and things, and we start to get to a world where things like Amazon's Echo actually understands the reasons why we make choices, which is not unrealistic. A good algorithm that tracks our behavior and has some basic understanding of decision-making processes, it could start to identify that if I choose product X in a certain way and product Y in a certain way, then actually I might like brand A, B, and C because of the following reasons. I think that's a very realistic likelihood, 5 to 10 years out from now. So that actually is where I'm getting very excited. I'm spending a lot of time trying to learn a bit more about AI. I confess I know very little about it right now, but I'm a hugely amateur enthusiast. So yeah, I think if I was going to make a gamble or make an investment perhaps in what happens next, that's where I'll be putting my money and my effort.
Okay. And what about the community side? Like, how is that going to evolve beyond Facebook? Like, do you see something coming up that can maybe not coming up yet, but what else are people going to be looking for to sort of build that community, build that communication?
Yeah, so I think even today, if you look at the way that the social media platform world is evolving, there's a very definite shift into chat apps. So the likes of WhatsApp and WeChat and Facebook Messenger, all these kinds of things. We've moved away already from a world that was dominated by public-facing conversations to a much more private and one-to-one or one-to-a-few in those group chat kind of contexts. And I think it's demonstration that there is always that desire for human contact and connection, and that's not going to go away. We've had hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution. It's not like suddenly the internet came along and we changed who we are as people. So I think that those basic human needs that social satisfies aren't going to change. And I think we'll just increasingly find more interesting, more efficient, more effective ways of achieving those needs, whether it's by twisting technology to our own advantage in the way that people did when they discovered SMSs hidden away at the back of phones and repurposed them for their own use, or if it's something that is done explicitly by the likes of Facebook when they go, actually we can see an opportunity to create platforms that will give people extra value, so we'll build it for them. So I think it's, the community will always exist, whether it's online or offline. I think that's an important point that marketers forget, is that it's not like there's a social media community. There's a community that just happens to be powered through social media, but when you put those people in a room, there's a very good chance that they get on as people as well. So it's starting off with them as people and then using technology to enhance those relationships, I think, is the important bit. That's the guidance that I would be giving any brand to talk to, is start with the people and then think about the platforms later. Don't do it the other way around.
Perfect. Yeah. So a very serious question, Simon. How do we get rid of all the cat photos and the baby pictures and stuff like that?
We don't get rid of them at all. So you've got two choices: embrace it or choose your friends more selectively.
Okay.
But I think it is really interesting. I confess, I like to think of myself as a fairly cerebral person. I get really into big intellectual challenges, but in reality, I get home at the end of the day and I can't resist a good photo of a puppy doing tricks and kittens slashing the sofa. It's just human nature. It's very easy to like cuddly things that do entertaining activities.
So when's somebody going to figure out how to actually market that?
I think BuzzFeed have cracked it, haven't they?
Okay.
Make it
True.
Yeah.
No, that's true. But I guess that's kind of the point, is that we want to sort of we want something friendly and that associates with what we can sort of do during our downtime as well. So, um,
Yeah.
back to business, Simon. What do you recommend businesses should be doing to sort of master social media? You mentioned people and platforms. Can you maybe go into more depth there?
Yeah, so always start with those people elements. I think regardless of what business you're in, even if when it's B2B, regardless of the size of your business, it's always going to be about selling to people until the bots take over. That is the reality of life. And the trick to selling is always going to be to understand the motivations and the needs of that audience and to satisfy them in the best possible way. So I think that understanding your audience is something that as marketers we've always struggled with, especially in a mass media world. We went down these routes of personas of demographics where it was mums aged 25 to 40, and somehow we thought that that would be enough to make all of those people similar, which is clearly nonsense. Even two sisters that fall into the same bracket are going to be different kinds of people with different motivations. And the joy is that if we have the time or the money to invest in analyzing social conversations and interactions, we can gain a much better understanding of those people and hopefully create things, whether it's marketing or even products, that are better suited to those people. It's never going to be perfect. I think that's the important bit. We're not looking to sort of go from 0 to 100 here, but the difference between 0 and 10 is always already a massive advantage to the brands that can do it. So even if you're only spending 5 minutes to read a few people in your audience and understand what they're like, that will give you insights that will make a big difference. Once you've understood a little bit more about those people and what they want, you can tweak products, you can totally tweak marketing, and in a lot of instances, you can actually bring those people into the franchise of your brand. So if they really, really care about it, you take an example like Tom's Shoes, similar sorts of brands like that, where they've got a very strong relationship with their audience, you can actually get them to help build your business with you by suggesting things that they think would be a good idea or to influence the design, whatever else. So it's very much about how do you involve people in your brands rather than how do you use social to sell your brands to people.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the major mistakes that a lot of businesses make is they're trying to sell you shit, right?
Yeah.
And most businesses don't kind of understand that it's important to listen and it's important to find out what exactly that customer is wanting to do and their behaviors and things like that. How can they refine, to the listening skills? Like we're talked about that in normal day-to-day life. We have to listen to what people are actually saying. How do you do that in the social media setting?
It's the same advice as you would get if you were sort of giving it in a social setting. So go in there not to listen for an opportunity to talk about yourself, which again is far too many times what brands are doing. They're going in and listening for mentions of their name or their hashtags, and that's interesting, but it's not how you're going to start meaningful conversations. So when I'm doing it, for example, if I'm starting out on a brief for a new client, the first thing I'll do is I'll just go in, I'll start off maybe by looking for mentions of a specific topic. So suppose that I'm going in to do a shampoo brand, I'll go in and look at conversations about shampoo very broadly.
So you'll go into specific threads and specific conversations?
Yep,
or?
I won't even necessarily use a tool to start with. I'll just go straight into twitter.com or instagram.com, just go in, look totally organically at what's going on there. So I might type in shampoo. It's usually not the best place to start. So if it was a shampoo brand, I'd probably type in hair, see what's going on. I would start to then take some notes, just things that I see. So it's really interesting that there's an awful lot of pictures of people's hair here, but they're hiding their faces. Does that mean something? Should we explore what that might mean and why that's happening? I'll probably spend maybe 2 hours doing that totally organically, no clever tools, no structure to it, just immersing myself into the conversations that are taking place right now. I'll build up some hypotheses and then I'll take those into a slightly more sort of powerful tool that allows me to explore those to either get some deeper insights or to disprove them and saying, actually, no, that was just a coincidence. Let's ignore that. So it sort of follows a little bit of basic research methodology, but at the same time, you're going in as a curious human being. It's like when you land in a new city that you've never been to before, one of the nicest things you can do is just wander around and soak up the sort of the atmosphere and the culture. And I think a lot of the times that's what social listening should be as well. We just go in there to sort of get a feel for what's going on before we start to form an opinion.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy too. Is the best way to enjoy those cultural differences, and in this case, marketing is to actually go out and walk and see and look and talk and all that kind of stuff.
So it's like, I was just in France last week. Always a great place to go people watching. And if you imagine sitting down sort of in the French Riviera, you've got yourself a nice glass of wine, you're sitting in a cafe on the strip in front of the beach, and you're just watching people go by. That is the genuine, most rewarding version of social listening I can think of. So the equivalent of that, just sit yourself down somewhere comfortable with a nice sort of good sized screen and a glass of something, and just
I was just going to say, can I have a glass of wine too?
Absolutely. I would always
while I search Twitter.
Get myself a glass of whiskey every time I do it. It's great.
There you go. I was going to say, I'll prefer whiskey, but wine's a good close second. That's really cool. Like that's really kind of getting down and finding out exactly what that customer is and doing and that sort of thing. So fantastic strategy there. So tell me a little bit about the agency, We Are Social. Like, what do you guys typically do? What kind of projects do you take on?
It's varying a lot more now. So we're lucky, like I mentioned at the beginning, we've been lucky enough to work with some of the world's biggest brands, and increasingly they're involving us in more and more stuff because of that ability to understand people's motivations. When we started out, we did an awful lot of work with blogs, and ironically, we were working with influencers before influencers were a thing that we talked about. They were just people that did great stuff, and we worked with them. We do an awful lot of sort of classical content marketing as well. So we produce videos for brands, we produce great sort of static imagery and stuff like that as well. We actually do quite a lot of events because they're great ways to involve communities in the real world and inspire conversations that then transit onto social media as well. So we'll pretty much look at almost any aspect of the marketing mix.
Do you do like advertising as well, or strictly sort of content focused?
Yeah. No, so we'll do advertising as long as there is a clear benefit back to the audience for that advertising. So we very much try and avoid doing interruptive advertising of the, hey, you were watching that great show, but screw that, come and listen to me talking about my lawnmower, which is just, nobody's interested in that kind of interruption. So,
some of those lawnmower commercials recently have been pretty good.
But if they are pretty good, then they're probably best off not interrupting your show, and you can take them onto social and have a great conversation around them.
Yeah.
So it's exactly that. It's identifying the right context for communication rather than buying an interruptive moment that might coincidentally happen to reach the right people at the right time, because it rarely does. So we do it, but we try and take a different approach to your sort of classic advertising agencies.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's good. And your sort of your personal business journey as well. You do a lot of speaking and presentations and workshops, or do you kind of keep to yourself within your company?
No, I'm very much the first one of those. I get out as much as I can. So I find that I learn a huge amount by going out and doing these sessions, the questions that people ask, even doing the research to prepare the topics that I want to talk about. It's the way that I sort of stimulate my brain. So I'm quite lucky. I get to work with a few different organizations. So obviously with We Are Social, the one that started the conversation with you today, but I also work with companies like Contagious, who are helping brands around the world to achieve the top 1% of creative excellence. So that's a really interesting challenge, because obviously it's slightly different from just the social media world. I do a lot of stuff with Hyper Island, who are helping sort of set a whole new paradigm for learning in the digital age, which is great. I get to do a whole lot of different things, but the public speaking and the creating stuff for the internets, I find still a hugely rewarding activity. So wherever I get the opportunity, I jump at that.
Oh, fantastic. And what is that sort of one message that you love to get out there at every presentation?
Understand people's motivations and start from there. It's always about that. And, wherever you can build relationships and rapport and empathy with people, that will allow you to be so much more successful and feel better about it as well.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. All right, cool. I'm going to wrap it up, Simon. I'd love to talk longer, but I know you're a busy guy because people are talking in the background.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
No, that's okay. Hey, we're a working podcast as well. So, and I really appreciate your time. So how do people find you online?
You can find me pretty much anywhere as Eskimon, so Eskimo with an N on the end of it. And if you do that and you want to get into deeper conversation, then you can just tweet me and I'll send you an email address.
Oh, perfect. Okay, cool. So once again, thank you, Simon. I really appreciate your time. And for all the listeners out there, we will have transcripts and we will put your Twitter link out there as well
Cool.
on the
Thanks.
site, thedigitaldelusion.com/podcast. And without further ado, thank you again, Simon.
Thanks,
and
Doyle.
have a wonderful day.
Cheers. See you.
Cheers. Thank you very much for listening to Breaking Digital, the podcast for smart entrepreneurs wanting to become true digital leaders in their industry and to own online. If you have any comments on the program, please feel free to connect on Twitter at Doyle Bueller with the hashtag #OwnOnline. I would really appreciate it if you could share this podcast with your network, as I'm sure they will get some value from it for building their successful business online as well. You can find the resources that we talked about, as well as the transcript and full podcast for download on thedigitaldelusion.com/podcast or on iTunes or on SoundCloud. I'm Doyle Bueller, and I will see you online.
Thank you for listening to Breaking Digital with Doyle Bueller. While he goes and makes a sandwich, you can find all of the notes, links, and details on this podcast by visiting thedigitaldelusion.com/podcast. Go on and click that now. www.thedigitaldelusion.com/podcast. I'll definitely click that. If you'd like a free copy of the book, The Digital Delusion, How to Overcome the Misguidance and Misinformation Online, just send an email to doyle@thedigitaldelusion.com. See you online.